When you see demos in Blazor, you often see the code on the same page as the HTML and Razor syntax. But for a production app, you more often want the code to be in a separate file. In this video, I will show you how to easily move the C# code from the component to a separate file. Now, for most of my training, I work to give you an in-depth perspective on technology. But sometimes you just need to get the quick answer to the question, how do I use this? That's why I created this 10-minute training series. So let's dive right into the code. Now, I've got already a sample Blazor server project that's just standard. I haven't changed anything. So let's go look at a couple of things here. We have the counter page, which has a little bit of code, and we also have the fetch data page, which down here also has a little bit of code. We're going to move both of these to the code behind file. And there's a reason why we'll do both. First, the really simple one, the counter page. So if I put my cursor anywhere in the code object, and I control dot, or this little light bulb here, if I drop down, extract block to code behind. If I click this, it creates a new file called counter.razor.cs. Now, you could have manually created this if you wanted to, but what this has done is it's moved the code out of the counter.razor file and into a separate .cs file that's named the exact same. That way it knows to link these two together. Now, this is just for ease of the editor. You don't have to name it the same thing. It's just the editor makes it easier, it can collapse like so, and now you can see the code behind very easily. Now, this is an older template, which is why we have 15 using statements that aren't actually being used. We can get rid of those. And also I'm going to use the file scope namespaces. So I'll put a semicolon there. So what we have is public partial class counter. And this is where, again, the partial classes come in. There's already a class called counter. But then Microsoft allows us to use a partial to add to that class. And this is the stuff that just we are going to add. This is not anything that's been pre-built. WinForms does this really well, where it shows the different versions of the partial class, where there's the one that Microsoft creates and updates, where every time you drag and drop a component onto the screen, it actually creates code for it in their generated code file. But then we also have our own version. We can modify the stuff in our version without stepping on the toes of the generated code. This is somewhat similar. So we have here a partial class counter. And we have the same code as before. And if we were to run this, let's just hit run, wait for it to launch, and go to counter page, and the counter page does work. So nothing has changed as far as functionality goes, but now we have the HTML and Razor syntax separated from our C# code. Now, why would we do this separation? Well, I prefer when I am creating a new page or a new component, I prefer to have the code on the same page with my Razor syntax, because of the fact that I go, wait, what was that variable name? And I have to remember to go back to it. And so I can create variables and methods and all the rest right on the page. It makes it much quicker for me to go back and forth. However, once you get into production, then you get into the time where you're like, hey, you know what? This is a pretty big code file. And it makes the page kind of confusing to have everything on it and scroll up and down quite a bit. Therefore, you can separate it out into its own .cs file. Is there a performance benefit to doing this? No. Is this on the page bad in some way? No. Is this somehow not separation of concerns? No. It's actually doing a great job of separation of concerns. If it's on the page, it's no different than if it's behind. Okay, this is the same exact thing as putting it on the page as far as functionality goes, as far as testability goes, as far as maintainability and all the rest. So it's up to you which place you put it. But I do want to point something out, and that is, if we go to fetch data, there's more to this page than just a little bit of code. Because if you look up here, we have an inject, which this brings in something from dependency injection. This is something that earlier versions of Blazor kind of struggled with when we moved to a code behind. So I want to show you how this works now. So if I were to say control dot to extract block to code behind, so now we have code behind for fetch data. Notice we have 16 using statements or using directives, and one of them is actually lit up because we're actually using it. So let's go back and get rid of the 15 that you're not using. Let's make this into a top level namespace file scope namespace. That's what it is. But notice that we have this using directive because we had this using directive up here. Now we're injecting the forecast service, but we're injecting it on the page. What about here? Well, we're using the forecast service right down here, but it's not anywhere on this page. And if we run this, we'll see that the page still works even though the page still brings in data. And notice that it's negative 18, 34, 30. So it keeps changing. So it is working. But notice that it's not actually showing us that we're injecting anywhere. That's because it's on this page. Now you could come over here and create a constructor and then inject it here instead. That's totally up to you. You can do that. However, you can also do it this way. And what's the benefit of doing this way? Well, the benefit is that your code doesn't break when you take it to a code behind. So if you've done it on the page and you've done the injection using the Razor syntax on the Razor component, which is a Blazor component, if you've done all that and then you move to a code behind, well, it'd be separate then from your code behind, and therefore it'd cause problems for your code here. It wouldn't actually find forecast service, and so it wouldn't work. So they said, hey, we can, because it's a partial class, the other part comes from this page, therefore it sees this injection, therefore it's actually combining those two after the fact, therefore it is available to us. So just so you know, that's a little bit more tricky, but that is available. It still will work. And if you want to leave it that way, cool. If you want to move it over to constructor injection, you can do that as well. All right, so that is how to do code behinds in Blazor and how to move the code from your page over to the code behind. If you have any questions or thoughts, leave them down in the comments. Thanks for watching, and as always, I am Tim Corey.